going on, guys? Snake Eyes here, playing some more Dark Souls 2. And in this video we're going to be doing a weapon showcase, and the weapon we're going to be showcasing today is the Bewitched Alonne sword. Now if you don't know how to get this weapon, you do have to purchase the second DLC, Crown of the Old Iron King, to get it. That's if you're playing on the console. If you're playing on PC, you can get it any other way. But for the most part, once you beat Sir Alonne, you have to trade his soul to Weaponsmith Ornifex. That's pretty much how you get it. Now we're going to go ahead and go into the details of it. Since I've gotten this weapon, I've upgraded mine to +5, so my base damage is at 180. It also gets a 80 base damage in the bleed attack. It has 150 in the counter strength. It does 20 poise damage per hit. It has 20 durability, and it weighs 9 pounds. Before I get this thing started, I know that it's called units in the Dark Souls like in-game stuff. I know that everything as far as when it refers to weight is called units. It might be just an American thing where I call everything pounds, but for the most part, I have a habit of calling it pounds. Some of you guys say that it kind of bothers you that I say it instead of units, but for the most part, I'm going to try to switch it back and forth, but there's really no guarantees. I've been calling it pounds for so long already that switching it over might just be a little rough. But just touching down, yes, I do know that it's called units. I just choose not to say it. The requirements for this weapon is that you need 22 strength and 30 dexterity, and it does get an S scaling in dex as soon as you upgrade it past +3. Now there are a couple of pros and cons to this weapon, and to be honest, I'm quite split on whether or not I actually really like it or not. One of the pros is that when you two-hand the weapon and you use the parry button, it does have a special animation where you stab yourself within the sword, and it does take a lot of damage from you. The pro to it though is that it adds, I think, 40% to your overall attack damage, so that's not too bad. That's kind of something you might want to weigh out. If you see your enemy using heavier armors and you want to deal more damage, then it's something that you might want to do. But for the most part, it's kind of a situational thing. I used it on and off, didn't really use it a whole lot. So it's kind of something that you're going to have to gauge on your own whether or not it might be worth it. In some instances, it was worth it for me, and in others, I just didn't even do it because I didn't feel like it was necessary. And that's probably one of the main things that this weapon has for it. There are a lot of cons to this weapon, and to be honest, I'm kind of disappointed since this was a weapon that I was really hyped for in the beginning. One of the cons, in my opinion, is that it does come with bleed damage, and in all honesty, bleed is not something that is useful in this game, in my opinion. It's very rare that you can actually do bleed on somebody. More often than not, you're probably going to kill them before you do the bleed damage, so that's kind of pointless. With this weapon, when you do the self buff, more often than not, you're probably going to kill them, or the bleed is probably not going to build up fast enough for you to actually apply it. So that's why I kind of say that it's a con. One of the other cons is that since it is a very huge katana, the attack speed on it is actually kind of slow. I noticed that it was actually really hard to hit people with lighter armors or people that were rolling around too much. It does have a unique moveset and a variety of moves that you can do to actually do something with, but for the most part, all the moves are actually really slow, so it's kind of something that you have to adjust your playstyle towards. I'm used to playing with the original katanas and playing in a pretty aggressive mode. For the most part, this weapon isn't for the person that's trying to be aggressive, and this actually weapon right here is a moveset that you have to be pretty comfortable with in order to actually do something with. And then when you stack that with the weapons and the moves actually being kind of slow, it's kind of something that you really do have to get used to, and it's a weapon that you really do have to master. Going back to the pros, one of the pros that I can think of is the length of the blade. Now, don't get confused with the length of the entire weapon. Actually, the hilt is pretty long, the handle of it is actually pretty long, but that does nothing for the range on this weapon, and it's kind of something that you might want to get used to. For the most part, if you can tell on some of these fights, I was doing swings that were pretty much missing, and that's mainly due to the fact that I took the length of the blade for the distance that I need to separate myself from the person I was fighting. That was a bad mistake because the length of the blade is actually a little bit shorter than that. I think if you stack it up with the washing pole actually still comes out longer, but that doesn't mean that this weapon isn't long in and of itself. For the most part, I'm kind of split with this weapon. I like the looks of it. I like the moveset on it. I like a lot of things about it. One of the bad things that was happening to me with the 2 sessions that I had with this weapon was that for some reason I was fighting against really laggy people, and that's where this weapon isn't the greatest. When you play against people who are a little bit laggy, pretty much with any weapon, the fights tend to kind of go bad. With this weapon, it wasn't no different, and since I really wasn't used to it, it was actually kind of a bad experience that I had on PvP. The sword itself isn't the worst, but at the same time it isn't the greatest. I think I read somewhere that if you have a fully maxed out Bewitched Alonne sword and 50 dex, the overall attack rating is still the weakest one in the katana class. And in all honesty, that's kind of upsetting because it seems like they kind of had an idea for a new katana and wanted to do a lot of things with it, but at the same time wanted to try to keep it balanced. So what they ended up doing was making a subpar katana with a pretty badass look, and that's something that's kind of fooling to somebody. It fooled me, but for the most part I really do like the weapon. I would recommend it if you were looking for another weapon to fool around with, but if you're looking for a replacement katana, if you want to use something different and you want this to be a permanent weapon, I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend fooling around with it first, taking it out on maybe some single player to get accustomed to the moveset. It's definitely something I would recommend you fooling around with before you invest all the material to upgrade it maxed out. But for the most part, that's pretty much going to wrap it up. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, take care.